Cleaning lady helps beggar in the cold, without knowing he was a businessman in disguise. Gladys Johnson was walking hurriedly through the empty streets of Chicago when she saw the man lying on the icy sidewalk. It was almost 5 in the morning, and she was already late for another day of work at the hospital, but something in her heart wouldn't let her simply walk past him. The man was shaking violently on the cold ground of Michigan Avenue. Without hesitation, Gladys took off her own coat and covered him, knowing she'd arrive at work freezing and might face trouble with her supervisor. But she couldn't ignore someone else's suffering. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The man opened his eyes with difficulty. He had an unshaven beard, dirty clothes, and a lost look. He mumbled something unintelligible before closing his eyes again. Gladys noticed what looked like an expensive watch on his wrist, but paid it no mind. Her only concern was that person's well-being. "I'll call an ambulance," she said, pulling out her old phone. No need," the man whispered weakly. Just need to rest a bit." Gladys was torn. She needed to get to work, but she couldn't bring herself to leave that man alone in such a state. She stayed a few more minutes until she was sure he was breathing normally and managed to sit up against the wall. "My name's Gladys. I work at Mercy Medical Center nearby. If you need anything, come find me there, all right?" The man just nodded, still dazed. Gladys arrived 40 minutes late at the hospital. Brenda, the supervisor, was furious, waiting at the entrance with her arms crossed. "Gladys Johnson, this is the 3rd time this month. You know very well we can't tolerate tardiness. The hallways don't clean themselves. Sorry, Mrs. Brenda. Something unexpected happened on the way." "Unexpected? What kind of unexpected?" The supervisor raised her voice, drawing the attention of other passing employees. Gladys hesitated. She knew the truth might sound like a flimsy excuse. "I found someone sick on the street and had to help." Brenda laughed scornfully. "Oh, of course, the hero of the nation. Gladys, you're 62 years old. Don't you think it's about time you took responsibility? Consider this your final warning." The words cut deep. Gladys had worked at that hospital for 15 years, always dedicated, always punctual. But lately, things at home had been tough. She was raising her 3 young grandchildren alone after her daughter had vanished, leaving the kids behind. The money barely covered the basics. Throughout her shift, Gladys couldn't stop thinking about the man on the street. Was he okay? Had he managed to eat? During her lunch break, instead of eating in the hospital cafeteria, she decided to return to where she'd found him. To her surprise, he was still there, now sitting up but still wearing her coat over his shoulders. When he saw her approach, the man smiled timidly. "You came back," he said, his voice clearer than that morning. "I brought you a sandwich." Gladys handed him half of her lunch. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you, and thank you for the coat too. You must be cold." "Oh, don't worry, I'm always moving around. I don't feel the cold as much." They talked for a few minutes. The man introduced himself as Walter, but Gladys sensed hesitation in his voice, as if he'd made up the name on the spot. Still, she didn't press. Everyone had a right to their secrets. "Walter, do you have family? Someone who can help?" The man lowered his eyes and stayed silent for a moment. No one. At least, no one who really cares." The sadness in his voice touched Gladys deeply. She knew the feeling of loneliness and abandonment all too well. "Well, you do now. I'll come by here every day at lunchtime." "You won't be alone, sir." And so began a routine that would last for weeks. Every day, Gladys Johnson would share her lunch with Walter, and they'd talk about life. She told him about her grandchildren, the difficulties at work, and the dreams she'd had when she was young. He listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions and offering surprisingly wise advice for someone living on the streets. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Walter spoke little about his past, but sometimes he'd let slip comments that puzzled Gladys. He knew a lot about business, about economics, and spoke of places he'd clearly visited. When she mentioned her financial struggles at home, He gave her suggestions on budgeting that were more precise than any advice she'd ever received. "Did you work with these things before?" she asked him one day. "I've worked with many things in life," he replied vaguely. "The streets teach you a lot too." Gladys accepted the answer, but remained curious. There was something about this man that didn't match his homeless appearance. The way he spoke, certain gestures, his demeanor when he was more at ease. In the third week of their meetings, something unexpected happened. Gladys had just gotten home from work when someone knocked on the door. It was an elegant woman, impeccably dressed, who seemed completely out of place in that humble South Side neighborhood. "Are you Gladys Johnson?" "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" The woman handed her a sealed envelope. "This is for you, have a nice day," and she left without another word, leaving Gladys confused at her doorstep. Her grandchildren ran over to see what was happening. "Grandma, who was that fancy lady?" asked 8-year-old Amber. "I don't know, sweetheart. Let's see what's in this envelope." Inside was an old photograph of a man in business attire, smiling in front of a towering commercial building. It took Gladys a few seconds to recognize him, but when she did, she nearly dropped the photo. It was Walter, younger, well-dressed, clearly in a prominent position, but it was unmistakably him. "Grandma, do you know this man?" asked 10-year-old Tyler, peering over her shoulder. "Yes, I do," murmured Gladys, still in shock. "But I don't understand." Her mind raced with questions. Who was that woman? How did she know Gladys had met Walter? And most importantly, who was Walter really? The next day, Gladys arrived at their usual spot with her heart pounding. She needed answers. Walter was sitting in the same place, looking more downcast than usual. "Walter, I need to ask you something." "Of course, Gladys. What is it?" She showed him the photograph. His face changed completely. His relaxed expression gave way to visible tension. "Where did you get this?" "A woman showed up at my house yesterday. She didn't introduce herself, just handed it to me and left." "Walter, who are you really?" The man fell silent for several long minutes, staring at the photo. "It's a long story, Gladys, and I'm not sure you'll like hearing it. I deserve to know. I've been sharing my lunch with you for weeks, worrying about you, losing sleep." "You're right," Walter sighed. "My real name is Walter Charles Anderson, and yes, I was a businessman once. I had a lot of money, a lot of power." "What happened? How did you end up here?" Walter looked up at the cloudy sky before answering. "I lost everything. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. The truth is more complicated." Gladys sat beside him, ready to hear the whole story. "I owned a construction company worth millions. I was surrounded by people I thought were my friends, people who cared about me. My daughter Jennifer always showed affection and concern. But over time I began to suspect people only got close out of self-interest. So, I decided to test it. I faked a devastating financial crisis, spread the word that I'd lost everything, that I was bankrupt. I wanted to see who'd stand by me when I had nothing left to offer." Gladys felt a tightness in her chest. "And then you found out that I was right. Everyone disappeared. Friends of decades, business partners, even my daughter. When the money ran out, so did the affection. It was a hard blow. But that doesn't explain why you're on the street." Walter ran a hand through his messy hair. "What was supposed to be just a test became reality. During the act, I got genuinely sick. Something in my brain, the doctors couldn't diagnose it properly. I started having memory lapses, mental confusion, and when that happened, Jennifer saw an opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" "She made me sign documents I didn't fully understand because of the illness. Transferred everything to her name, claiming it was to protect the assets. When I improved a bit and tried to reverse things, I found out I legally owned nothing. Worse, she'd spread that I had severe mental issues, that I wasn't fit to manage anything." Gladys was shocked. Human cruelty never failed to surprise her, even after so many years. "What about lawyers? Can't anyone do anything?" Jennifer was very clever. Hired the best professionals, built a solid case. To the world, she's the devoted daughter caring for her sick father. And me, I'm just a confused old man who lost his mind. But you're lucid, Walter. You speak normally, think clearly. I am now. But there was a time I really wasn't well, and that's what she used against me. Gladys fell silent, processing everything she'd heard. It was an unbelievable story, yet it explained so much about Walter. Why don't you seek help? Other lawyers, people who can prove you're fine? I've tried, but Jennifer has unlimited resources now and I have nothing. Plus, who'd believe a homeless man against a respected businesswoman? The conversation was interrupted by a group of well-dressed men approaching. Gladys recognized the type, arrogant executives from the area's office buildings. "Look, the beggar got himself a girlfriend," one said, laughing. "Aren't you ashamed, old man? First you beg in front of our building, now you're corrupting honest working women," another added. Gladys stood up, furious. "You're mistaken, this man isn't bothering anyone." "Oh yeah, and who are you, his lawyer?" The first man looked Gladys up and down with disdain. "Aren't you the cleaner from Mercy Medical Center?" The humiliation was instant. Gladys felt her face burn with shame. "Yes, I'm a cleaner, and I'm proud of my work." "Then you should be working instead of wasting time with a bum. By the way, didn't you get fired this morning?" Gladys's world collapsed. How did these men know that? She didn't even know yet. "What are you talking about? Your supervisor was mentioning it over coffee. Too many absences, punctuality issues. About time, right? A hospital's no place for irresponsible people." Walter tried to stand up to defend Gladys, but was shoved back to the ground. "Stay down, beggar. Enough of you two causing trouble here." The men walked away laughing, leaving Gladys and Walter devastated. She needed to rush to the hospital to find out if it was true, but her legs wouldn't obey. "Gladys, I'm so sorry," Walter said, struggling to his feet. "It's not your fault," she replied, but bitterness tinged her voice. "I have to go." She hurried off, leaving Walter alone on the sidewalk. At the hospital, the news was confirmed. Brenda was at the reception desk with a termination letter ready. "Gladys, you already know why you're here. We can no longer tolerate your tardiness and absences. This is your termination notice." "Mrs. Brenda, please, I need this job. I have 3 grandchildren to raise alone." "You should have thought of that before. The decision has already been made." Gladys left the hospital carrying a box with her few personal belongings. 15 years of dedicated work ended just like that, coldly, without a word of thanks. At home, the grandchildren immediately sensed something was wrong. "Grandma, why are you home so early?" asked Amber. "And why do you have that box?" added Tyler. Gladys sat on the old couch and tried to explain the situation in a way the children could understand. Little Emily, just 5 years old, started crying when she realized there would be no more money for food. That night, Gladys wept while holding her grandchildren, unsure how she would pay next month's rent or put food on the table. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The next day, Gladys avoided walking down Michigan Avenue. She wasn't ready to face Walter and explain that she had lost her job because of the delays caused by their meetings. But to her surprise, he showed up at her doorstep in the late afternoon. "How did you find out where I live?" she asked, startled. "I asked around the neighborhood. Everyone knows Mrs. Gladys, the cleaning lady who raised her grandchildren alone." She let him in, embarrassed by the simplicity of her home. 2 small bedrooms, a cramped living room and kitchen, old but clean furniture. "Walter, you shouldn't have come. The neighbors will talk." "Gladys, I know you lost your job, and I know it was because of me." "It wasn't your fault," she lied. "Yes, it was. If you hadn't stopped to help me that day, you never would have been late. And if you hadn't come to see me every day, you wouldn't have had the absences that led to your termination." The grandchildren watched the conversation with curiosity. Walter turned to them warmly. "You must be Gladys's grandkids. She talks about you all the time." "Are you the man Grandma helps on the street?" asked Tyler, blunt as only children can be. "I am, and now it's my turn to help her." "But you don't have money," said Amber, confused. Walter smiled sadly. "You're right, I don't have money, but I have other things that might help." Gladys didn't understand what he meant, but Walter insisted she come with him the next day to look for a new job. She hesitated, but her desperate situation made her agree. They walked through several downtown streets, Walter showing he knew the city far better than he seemed. He knew exactly where the offices were, their business hours, even some of the people who worked in the buildings. "How do you know so much?" Gladys asked. "I've spent a lot of time in this area," he replied vaguely. When they passed by a particularly imposing office building, Walter stopped abruptly. He stared at it with a strange expression. "Walter, are you okay? This building... I know this building. Of course, it's the Sears Tower, one of the most famous on Michigan Avenue. No, that's not it. I used to work here." Gladys looked at the building, then at Walter. It was a high-end building, clearly housing only important businesses. "Doing what?" Walter closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. "I'm remembering things. The 15th floor, room 1505. Anderson Construction." "Walter, are you all right?" "My company was here, on the 15th floor. I had an office with a view of the whole city." The memories seemed to come rushing back like a flood. Walter held onto Gladys's arm for support. "I'm remembering meetings, important contracts." "Gladys, I really was a successful businessman. And what happened to your company? Jennifer, my daughter, she transferred everything. When I got sick, she took advantage and seized control." At that moment, two men in suits stepped out of the building and recognized Walter. Gladys noticed the immediate tension on their faces. "Walter Charles, are you all right? We've been looking for... Looking for what?" Walter straightened up, displaying a posture Gladys had never seen in him before. "Jennifer said that you weren't well, that you might be lost out here. Jennifer lied to you, just like she lied to everyone." The men exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. "Walter Charles, maybe it's best if you come back home. Jennifer is very worried." "I'm sure she is," Walter replied with irony. Gladys watched everything without fully understanding, but sensed there was much more to the story than Walter had told her. After the men walked away, Walter explained they were former employees of his company, now working for Jennifer. "They know the truth, Gladys. They know I'm not crazy, that I was deceived. But they're cowards. They'd rather keep their jobs than do what's right. Isn't there anything we can do?" "Not with the proof I have." Jennifer was very careful. But that night, something changed. Walter began having more frequent and clearer flashbacks of his past life. He remembered important details, passwords, documents hidden in secret places, people who could testify in his favor. "Gladys, I need your help," he said the next day. "I remembered where I kept some important documents that can prove I was forced to sign those transfers." "Where are they?" "In a safe deposit box at the bank. But to access it, I need to look presentable. No one will take a homeless man seriously." Gladys used what little savings she had to buy Walter simple but clean clothes. When he dressed and shaved, the transformation was striking. He looked like the man in the photograph again, though older and marked by life. At the bank, Walter accessed the safe and found documents confirming his suspicions. There were recordings of conversations with Jennifer, where she admitted taking advantage of her father's illness, as well as contracts signed with clearly different handwriting, suggesting forgery. "Now we have proof of the truth," Walter said, emotional. But their joy was cut short when they left the bank. Jennifer was waiting outside with two private security guards. "Dad, I finally found you," she said, feigning concern. "You had us so worried." "Jennifer, you know exactly where I was. You're not well, Dad. You need to come home and take your medication." "I don't need any medication, and you know it." His daughter looked at Gladys with disdain. "And who are you? The private nurse he hired with what money?" "I'm his friend," Gladys replied firmly. "Friend?" Jennifer laughed. "My father doesn't have friends, just people who want to take advantage of him." Walter showed the documents he had retrieved from the safe. "Jennifer, the game is over. I have everything I need to prove what you did." His daughter's expression changed completely when she saw the papers. "Dad, you don't understand. I did it all to protect you, to protect our family." "Lies. You did it all out of greed." Jennifer signaled for the guards to step closer. "My father isn't well. These documents are old, from when he still had mental capacity. Now he needs special care. Gladys realized the situation was turning dangerous. The guards were large, intimidating men. "Walter, let's go," she whispered. "No, Gladys, I'm tired of running. It's time to face the truth." But Jennifer was faster. She grabbed her phone and called someone. "Dr. Richards, it's Jennifer Anderson. My father is having another episode. Yes, he's out on the street causing trouble again. He needs to be hospitalized immediately." Walter turned pale. "She has a doctor in her pocket, a psychiatrist who certifies I'm incompetent whenever she needs it." Within minutes, an ambulance arrived. The doctor stepped out already holding involuntary commitment papers. "Mr. Walter Charles, you need to come with us. It's for your own good." "I'm not going anywhere. I'm perfectly fine." "Daddy, please don't make this harder," Jennifer pleaded, keeping up the charade. Gladys saw she had to act. She couldn't let Walter be taken unjustly. "Wait," she shouted. "This man is fine. I can testify that he's lucid and aware." The doctor looked at her with disdain. "And who are you to give a medical opinion? I'm someone who spends every day with him and can vouch for his mental state." "Dr. Richards, this woman is a fraud," Jennifer interrupted. "She's clearly trying to take advantage of my father's confusion." "That's a lie," Gladys defended herself. "I never asked him for anything. I just offered help when he needed it." But her words carried no weight against those of a respected businesswoman and a licensed doctor. Walter was taken away in the ambulance, but not before discreetly handing the documents to Gladys. "Keep these," he whispered. "They're our only hope." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Gladys stood alone on the sidewalk, holding the papers and unsure what to do. Jennifer approached her before leaving. "Listen carefully, Mom. My father is sick, and you're taking advantage of that. If you keep up this act, I'll sue you for exploiting a vulnerable elder. I only helped him when he was in need." "Sure, and now that you've found out who he is, you want to profit. I know your type all too well." "You're mistaken." "Am I? Then explain why an unemployed cleaning lady cares so much about a homeless man." The question hit Gladys like a slap. Was there really some self-interest deep down? She began doubting her own motives. I just wanted to help someone who was suffering." "How convenient." "Well, my father is in good medical hands now. I suggest you forget he exists and focus on your own life." Jennifer got in her car and drove off, leaving Gladys devastated. She went home with a heavy heart. Her grandchildren immediately sensed something was wrong. "Grandma, where's your friend?" Emily asked. "He had to go away, sweetheart." But the kids weren't fooled. They could tell their grandmother was lying and grew worried. That night, Gladys examined the documents Walter had given her. Even without fully understanding the legal terms, she could tell they were important. There were contracts, transcribed recordings, even photos showing discrepancies in signatures. But what could she do? She was an unemployed cleaning woman with no means to hire a lawyer. And who would believe her over a powerful businesswoman? The following days were the worst of Gladys's life. With no job and no money, she had to sell the few valuables she had at home. The grandchildren started eating only 2 meals a day to save food. Tyler, seeing how desperate things were, decided to help. Without telling his grandmother, he went out offering to do odd jobs for cash. At just 10 years old, he carried grocery bags, washed cars, did anything to earn a few dollars. When Gladys found out, she was heartbroken. "Tyler, you can't do this. It's dangerous. You're just a child." "But Grandma, you don't have a job. Someone needs to help." "It's not your responsibility, my boy." "Then whose is it? Dad and Mom who abandoned us? Your street friend who disappeared?" Tyler's words cut deep because they were true. Gladys felt like a complete failure. 2 weeks later, when the situation seemed hopeless, something unexpected happened. Gladys was at the store trying to decide whether to buy rice or beans with her last few coins when someone touched her shoulder. It was Walter. Thinner, with tired eyes, but free. "Walter, how did you get out?" "It's a long story. Can we talk?" They sat on a bench in a nearby park. Walter explained that he had managed to contact an old lawyer, someone who knew the truth about Jennifer. With the help of documents and a few witnesses who finally found the courage to speak up, he proved his hospitalization had been illegal. And now, did you recover your assets? I'm on my way, but it'll be a long battle. Jennifer won't give up easily. What will you do in the meantime? Walter looked at Gladys with determination. I want to help you first. I found out what happened at the hospital, how you lost your job, and I know it was because of me. Walter, we've talked about this. Gladys, you saved my life. Not just that first day, but every day after. You gave me dignity when I had lost everything. Now it's my turn to repay you. But you don't have the mean... Yes, I do. Maybe not money right now, but something more valuable. Experience and connections. I'll help you find not just a job, but something better. Gladys wanted to believe, but she was tired of dashed hopes. In the following days, Walter proved his words weren't empty. Using his knowledge and a few loyal contacts, he secured her an interview with a cleaning company that serviced high-end offices. But Walter, I don't have experience with this kind of work. You have hospital experience, which is far more demanding. Besides, I personally recommended you. How can you recommend me? You don't work there. I don't, but I know the owner. Robert Wilson was my business partner years ago. He's one of the few who didn't abandon me when everyone thought I'd lost everything. The interview went better than Gladys expected. Robert, a man in his 50s, greeted her personally and treated her with respect. Walter Charles spoke very highly of you, said you're the most dedicated and honest person he knows. He exaggerated. Walter Charles doesn't exaggerate. If he says it, it's true. Gladys got the job with better pay than the hospital and more flexible hours. For the first time in weeks, she came home with good news. Grandma got a new job, Tyler shouted excitedly. And the pay is better, Gladys added, smiling. Thanks to your friend Walter, Amber asked. Yes, thanks to Walter. But not everything went smoothly. In her first week, Gladys learned Jennifer had tried to interfere. She called Robert to discredit her. She said you were taking advantage of her sick father, and that I shouldn't trust you, Robert told her. And you believed her? Of course not. I've known Walter Charles for over 20 years. I know exactly what kind of man he is, and what kind of daughter he has. Gladys was relieved but worried. Jennifer clearly wouldn't back down, and her fears were justified. In the following months, Jennifer did everything to hurt both Walter and Gladys, trying to get her fired, spreading rumors, even sending people to intimidate her. Realizing what was happening, Walter made a drastic decision. Gladys, I'm giving up everything. What do you mean? I'm stopping the fight for my assets. It's not worth it if it means putting you in danger. Walter, you can't do this. It's your life, your work of decades. And you're the best person I've ever known in my entire life. I'd rather lose my possessions than lose your friendship. Walter's decision deeply moved Gladys, but she couldn't accept it. I won't let you give up. We'll find another way. What way? Jennifer has unlimited resources and no scruples. Then let's use the one weapon she doesn't have. What weapon? The truth, and people who truly care. Gladys had noticed something during the months of battle. They weren't alone. Robert was willing to help. Some of Walter's former employees began speaking up, and even people who had known the Anderson family for years started questioning Jennifer's version of events. Walter, what if instead of fighting in court, we told our story publicly? How so? A journalist, someone who can investigate and show the truth to everyone. The idea seemed risky to Walter, but also promising. Through Robert, they got in touch with an investigative journalist who took an interest in the story. Margaret Franklin was a respected professional, known for exposing corruption schemes and injustices. When she heard Walter and Gladys's story, she immediately saw its potential. This is a story that needs to be told, she said. It shows how power can corrupt even the most sacred family bonds. But Jennifer could sue us, Gladys worried. She could try, but if we have the right evidence, she won't succeed. And do you have proof? Walter showed all the documents he had saved. Margaret examined everything carefully. This is gold. You don't just have evidence of coercion, but also forgery and abuse of power. Margaret's investigation took 3 months and revealed far more than Walter had imagined. Jennifer hadn't just taken her father's assets, she was also involved in overbilling schemes for public projects and money laundering. When the article was published, it made a huge impact. Walter and Gladys's story deeply moved the public, but the revelations about Jennifer's crimes caught the attention of authorities. Within a week, Jennifer was under investigation, and Walter had regained all his assets. But the victory brought an important reflection for both of them. "Gladys, now that I have everything back, will our friendship change?" Walter asked. "Why would it?" "Because now I'm rich again, and you've seen how people act when money is involved." Gladys thought for a moment before answering. "Walter, our friendship began when you had nothing. It wasn't money that made me care about you. It was your humanity, your gratitude, your way of treating people. Those things don't change with money. What if I offered financial help for you and your grandchildren?" "It would depend on the kind of help." Walter smiled, understanding the wisdom in her answer. "How about if I offered not money but opportunity?" "What kind of opportunity?" "A partnership. You've taught me so much about dignity and honest work. What if we used that experience to create something that helps others like us?" The idea intrigued Gladys. "Go on." "A company that connects people who need work with dignified opportunities. But not just that. A company that treats workers as human beings, offers real benefits and cares about families." "And how would I be part of it?" "You'd be my partner. Your experiences as a worker would give us the legitimacy I've never had. You'd know better than I do what employees truly need." The offer was tempting, but Gladys had doubts. "Walter, I don't know anything about running a business. And I didn't know anything about surviving on the streets until I went through it. We learn." After much thought and talking with her grandchildren, Gladys accepted the proposal. Together, they created Dignity and Work, a service company that stood out for how it treated its employees. The beginning was challenging. Many clients were surprised that a former cleaner was now a business partner, but the results spoke for themselves. D&W's employees were more dedicated, more careful, and more reliable than the competition. "Do you know why?" Gladys explained in a meeting with potential clients. "Because they know they're valued, that their rights are respected, that they're part of something bigger." The company grew quickly. Within 2 years, it was one of the largest in the sector in the Chicago metropolitan area. But more important than financial success was the social impact it made. Gladys implemented a daycare program for employees' children, training courses, quality healthcare, and even an emergency fund for tough situations. "This company was born from the experience of someone who's been in need," she explained to new employees. "That's why we know exactly what you need." Walter, in turn, used his business expertise to expand the company sustainably, but he always consulted Gladys on decisions that could affect the workers. "Gladys, we have a proposal to expand to Los Angeles," he said one day. "Good idea, but how do we ensure we'll maintain our standards there?" "You're right. What if we personally oversee the setup? Even better, what if we train someone from the area itself, someone who knows the local reality?" This philosophy of responsible growth became the company's trademark. Wherever they expanded, they first understood the local reality and hired leaders from the community itself. Success brought recognition. Gladys was invited to speak at universities about social entrepreneurship. Walter became sought after by other business owners who wanted to understand D&W's secret. "The secret is simple," Walter would say. "Treat people, not like resources." But growth also brought new challenges. Jennifer, even while serving time for her crimes, still tried to cause trouble through lawyers and people she trusted. "She'll never accept that she lost," Gladys remarked. "Maybe it's time to offer one last chance for reconciliation," Walter suggested. "Are you serious?" "I am. Hate only breeds more hate. Maybe it's time to break that cycle." Walter decided to visit Jennifer in prison. It was a difficult and emotional meeting. "Dad, Jennifer, I'm not here to fight but to understand. Why did you do all that?" His daughter cried for long minutes before answering. "Because I was afraid. Afraid of losing you, afraid I wasn't good enough, afraid others would matter more than me." "And why didn't you talk to me about these fears?" "Because I thought you'd see me as weak. You were always so strong, so successful. I felt I could never measure up. Walter realized he had failed as a father. In his pursuit of professional success, he had neglected his daughter's emotional needs. "Jennifer, when you get out of here, you'll have a chance to start over. If you want, you can work at D&W, not in a leadership role, but learning from the ground up what honest work means." "Why would you do that for me after everything I've done?" "Because I learned from a very special person that everyone deserves a second chance." Gladys was surprised when Walter told her about the conversation, but supported his decision. When Jennifer was released 2 years later, she started as a cleaning assistant at D&W, working directly under Gladys's supervision. It was a difficult adjustment period for everyone. Jennifer had to learn to value work she once looked down on. Gladys had to find the strength to forgive someone who had tried to destroy her life. "Mrs. Johnson, can I ask you something?" said Jennifer one day. "Of course." "Why are you giving me this chance? I was terrible to you." Gladys stopped working and looked at the young woman. "Jennifer, when your father was on the street, I didn't ask who he was before helping. I just saw someone who needed help. Now I see you the same way." "But I don't deserve forgiveness." "No one deserves forgiveness, Jennifer. Forgiveness is a gift we give not because someone deserves it, but because our hearts need to be free from the weight of resentment." Those words deeply marked Jennifer. She began to dedicate herself to the work genuinely, learning not just the practical tasks, but also the value of serving others. Over time, she proved she had truly changed. She became one of the most dedicated employees and even led a project to include former inmates in the company. Who better to understand people who've made mistakes than someone who's been through it themselves, she argued in a meeting. The project was a success and became a model for other companies. 5 years after that first encounter on Michigan Avenue, D&W had become one of the largest service companies in the United States. But more important than its size was its social impact. Thousands of families had been helped by the dignified jobs it provided. Gladys, now 67, was recognized as one of the most influential social entrepreneurs in the country. Her grandchildren attended good schools and had future prospects she had never dreamed possible. Walter had found a purpose far greater than simply accumulating wealth. The company was his way of giving back to society everything he had received. "You know, Gladys, sometimes I think I had to lose everything to find what really matters." "And what's that?" "True human connections. The satisfaction of knowing your work improves others' lives. The peace of mind that comes from doing the right thing." "Do you regret anything?" Walter thought for a moment. "I regret taking so long to learn these lessons, but I don't regret the journey because it brought me to you and to this family we've built together." And it was true. D&W had become more than a company. It was an extended family. Employees supported each other, celebrated successes together, and helped one another in tough times. Gladys had implemented traditions like Gratitude Day, where employees shared stories of how the company had impacted their lives. These meetings often ended with tears of emotion and heartfelt hugs. "This company wouldn't exist without every one of you," Gladys would say on these occasions. "You're not just employees, you're partners in the mission to prove that business can be done with heart." Recognition came in many forms: social responsibility awards, features in national newspapers, invitations to speak at international events. But none of it changed the essence of Gladys and Walter. Every morning before work, they still met for coffee and talked about the day's plans, a tradition they'd kept since the company's early days. "Remember when our biggest worry was landing our first client?" Gladys laughed one morning. "And you wanted to quit because you thought we wouldn't make it," Walter replied. "I said I was scared, not that I wanted to quit. There's a difference." "True, you've always been braver than you thought. And you've always been more human than you seemed when you were just a wealthy businessman." These morning conversations were precious to both of them, a time to reflect on their journey, plan for the future, and above all, keep alive the essence that had given birth to the company. One such morning, Walter brought up a special idea. "Gladys, how about we do something to mark our 5th anniversary?" "What kind of thing?" "A documentary. Sharing our story, showing the company's impact, inspiring others to follow the same path." "I don't know, Walter. I don't really like the spotlight. It wouldn't be about us. It'd be about the message, about proving that success can be built without losing humanity. Gladys considered the idea. She had received many messages from people inspired by her story, asking for advice on how to start similar projects. Maybe you're right. If our story can help others, it's worth sharing. The documentary, From Street Cold to the Warmth of Hope, was produced over a year, following the daily life of D&W and telling the story of Walter and Gladys. It included interviews with employees, clients, and even Jennifer, who had become an advocate for second chances. My father and Mrs. Gladys taught me that to err is human, but to persist in error is foolishness, Jennifer said in her interview. This company exists to prove that everyone can change, can grow, can become better versions of themselves. The documentary premiered at film festivals and was later made available for free online. The impact was immense. Hundreds of people sent messages saying they had been inspired to treat their employees better, to be more compassionate toward those in vulnerable situations, or even to start their own social projects. One of the messages that touched Gladys the most came from a young businesswoman in Atlanta. Mrs. Gladys, after watching your documentary, I completely changed how I run my company. I implemented daycare for employees' children, created an emergency fund, and started training courses. The results were incredible. Productivity increased, turnover decreased, and most importantly, I feel I'm making a real difference in people's lives. Thank you for showing that success and compassion can go hand in hand. Messages like this arrived daily, confirming that the decision to share their story had been the right one. But perhaps the greatest recognition came from an unexpected source. One December morning, Gladys received an official call. She had been nominated to receive a Medal of Honor for her contribution to the country's social development. "Walter, can you believe this?" she said, emotional. "I do, and I'm glad they finally recognize what I've always known. You're an extraordinary person. We are extraordinary. This achievement is ours." The medal ceremony took place in Washington, D.C., in a gathering that brought together officials and dignitaries from across the country. Gladys's grandchildren were there, dressed in their finest clothes and bursting with pride. "Grandma, are you going to speak on TV?" asked Emily, now 10 years old. "Yes, sweetheart. And will you talk about that first day when you helped Grandpa Walter?" "I'll talk about that and much more." In her acceptance speech, Gladys moved the audience. "This medal isn't mine, it belongs to every worker who believed they deserved dignity, to every business owner who chose profit with purpose, to every person who, even in hardship, never lost the ability to reach out to those in need. When I met Walter on that cold morning, I didn't know I was also finding my future, my purpose, my family. I only knew there was a human being suffering and that I had the chance to help." This is the message I want to leave. We don't need much to make a difference. Sometimes all someone needs is a coat in the cold, a shared sandwich, a word of encouragement. Life takes care of the rest. Thank you to everyone who believed in our vision. Thank you especially to Walter, who taught me that true friendship doesn't depend on a bank account. And thank you to my grandchildren, who remind me every day why it's worth fighting for a better world. The speech was widely shared and went viral on social media, inspiring even more people to follow their example. After the ceremony, Walter and Gladys walked through the gardens of the Capitol building, reflecting on the extraordinary journey they had lived. "Gladys, do you have any regrets?" "I have one." "What is it?" "I regret taking so many years to discover what I'm capable of, but at the same time, I know everything happened at the right time." "Do you have any other dreams to fulfill?" Gladys looked at the horizon and smiled. "I do. I want to see our company spread across the entire United States. I want our model to become the standard, not the exception. And most of all, I want to live long enough to see my grandchildren grow into adults who know they can change the world." "All those dreams will come true," Walter assured her. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've learned that when you combine goodwill with determination, miracles become inevitable." And indeed, the dreams kept coming true. D&W expanded to 12 US states, always upholding the same principles it was founded on. Tyler, Gladys's eldest grandson, began showing interest in the business and started attending company meetings during school breaks. "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to work with you," he said one day. "Of course, my dear, but first you'll study hard, graduate, and see the world. After that, if you still want to, there will be a place for you here." "But I want to start from the bottom, just like Aunt Jennifer did." The boy's maturity impressed Gladys. At 15, Tyler already displayed strong values and a deep understanding of social justice. Amber, on the other hand, became interested in communications, inspired by the documentary about their family. "I want to tell stories that inspire people, just like ours did," she declared. Emily, the youngest, surprised everyone with her sensitivity to social issues. At 12, she organized a coat drive at school for the homeless. "I learned from Grandma that helping others is the most important thing we can do," she explained to her teachers. Seeing her grandchildren grow with such strong values was Gladys's greatest achievement. She knew she had planted seeds that would keep growing for generations. One special afternoon, 10 years after that first meeting on Michigan Avenue, Gladys and Walter decided to revisit the place where it all began. They walked along the sidewalk where he had been found, now transformed, but still carrying the lessons from that moment. "It's strange being here knowing everything that's happened since then," Gladys remarked. "It's like we're completely different people," Walter agreed. "We are different people, but at the same time, we're exactly who we always were inside. You were always generous, you just hadn't discovered it yet. I was always brave, I just hadn't tested my limits." They sat in the same spot where they had talked so many times during those first months. "Gladys, I have a confession to make." "What confession?" "That first day when you offered to help me, I thought you were just another person trying to take advantage. It took me weeks to believe your kindness was real. And now I know you're one of the purest people I've ever met, and I'm honored to be your friend. Walter, you also have qualities I took time to recognize: your determination, your ability to forgive, your humility in learning new things. Age teaches us a lot about what really matters, doesn't it?" "It does, but most of all it teaches us that it's never too late to start over, to be better, to make a difference." As the sun began to set, they stood up to head home. But first, Gladys took a moment to reflect. "Walter, do you think our story would have been different if you had truly been homeless with no money or power?" "No, Gladys, because what we built together had nothing to do with money. It was about mutual respect, shared values, and the desire to create something bigger than ourselves." "So our friendship would have been the same?" "Our friendship would have been exactly the same, and our company too, because it was born from our hearts, not our bank accounts." This certainty brought them both deep peace. They knew they had built something authentic, grounded in solid foundations that would withstand any storm. On their way back, they passed by the D&W headquarters. Even though it was the weekend, some lights were still on. Volunteer employees were preparing meal kits to distribute in underserved communities the next day. "Look," Walter pointed, "they're working by choice, without expecting anything in return. It's because they understand they're part of something greater. When people feel valued, they naturally want to contribute more. That's the greatest lesson I've learned in my entire business career. Treat people well, and they'll treat your business well." They went inside to greet the volunteers and were met with genuine smiles and warm hugs. "Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Walter, so good to see you here," said Mary, the cleaning supervisor who had become one of the volunteer leaders. "What are you preparing?" Gladys asked. "Tomorrow we're distributing 300 kits in 3 different communities. Food, hygiene products, and most of all, kindness." "Can I help?" "Of course, everyone can help." And so they spent the night assembling kits side by side with their employees, talking about life, sharing stories, and strengthening the bonds that made D&W more than just a company. "You know something, Walter," Gladys said as she sealed another kit. "What?" "I think we're living the happiest ending I could have imagined for our story." "How so?" "We didn't just build a successful business, we built a community of people who care about each other. That's rare in the business world. And most importantly, we proved it's possible to do well and do good at the same time. Exactly. Our greatest achievement isn't awards or money. It's knowing we've changed lives for the better. By the time they finished preparing the kits, it was past midnight. Everyone was tired but happy. There were hugs, mutual thanks, and promises to meet again the next day for the distribution. Walter and Gladys were the last to leave. They walked slowly through the nearly empty streets, enjoying the quiet of the early morning. Gladys, I have one last question. Go ahead. If you could go back in time, would you do everything exactly the same? Gladys thought carefully before answering. I would. Every mistake, every success, every hard moment, all of it was necessary to bring us here. Even knowing all the suffering we went through? Especially because of the suffering. It taught us to appreciate our victories, gave us empathy to understand others' pain, and motivated us to create something that made a real difference. You're wise, Gladys Johnson. And you're a good man, Walter Charles Anderson. It took me a while to see it, but you always were. When they arrived at Gladys's house, her grandchildren were still awake, waiting to hear about their day. Grandma, how was your visit to the place where you met Grandpa Walter? It was special, my dears. It reminded us how far we've come. And how was that? Tyler pressed. One step at a time, with a lot of courage and most of all faith that good things happen to those who never stop doing good. And do they always happen? Emily asked. Always, my dear. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it comes in ways we don't expect, but it always happens. Walter said goodbye to his family and headed home. But first, he stopped on the porch to gaze at the stars. He felt a deep gratitude for the journey he'd taken, for all the people who had been part of it, especially Gladys. At home, Gladys also took a moment to look at the night sky before bed. She thought about all the challenges they'd faced, all the victories they'd won, and all the love they'd found along the way. And so, after an extraordinary journey that began with a simple act of compassion on a cold morning, two people had discovered not just success in business, but something far more valuable: the true meaning of friendship, human dignity, and the transformative power of kindness. Their lives were living proof that when we choose to help others, even when we don't have much to give, the universe conspires to multiply that kindness in unimaginable ways. D&W would continue to grow, touching more lives and inspiring more people, but its essence would always remain the same: the belief that everyone deserves dignity, opportunity, and above all, a second chance. And somewhere in the United States, others would be facing similar situations, with the choice to walk past or lend a hand. The story of Gladys and Walter would always serve as a reminder that this choice can change not only the life of the person receiving help, but especially the life of the one offering it. Because in the end, when we help someone rise, we inevitably rise ourselves. The end of the story. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this story of perseverance and true friendship? Do you believe a simple act of kindness can completely transform lives? Share your thoughts with us in the comments and tell us if you've ever experienced or witnessed a similar situation. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories that touch the soul.